Picture yourself standing before an endless corridor of books, their leather spines stretching into shadows that seem to swallow light itself. The air is thick with the scent of ancient parchment and forgotten secrets. Each volume whispers promises of truths too dangerous for ordinary minds, knowledge so profound it could reshape everything you believe about reality. This is not just any library. This is the Library of Babylon, and tonight we're about to uncover why it might be the most terrifying repository of forbidden knowledge ever conceived. Welcome back to another journey into the mysteries that haunt our world. I'm your guide through the shadows of history, and what I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you think you know about the relationship between knowledge and power. Because hidden within the dusty archives of one of history's most enigmatic civilizations lies a truth so disturbing that empires have risen and fallen trying to suppress it. Babylon. The very name sends chills down the spine of anyone who understands its true significance. Not just a city, but a gateway between worlds. Not just a kingdom, but a keeper of secrets that predate recorded history. The ancient Akkadian name Bavel literally means gate of God. But what if that translation is hiding something far more sinister? What if Babylon wasn't just a gate to the divine, but a portal to knowledge so forbidden that possessing it could drive civilizations to madness? For over 4 millennia, scholars have dismissed the legendary Library of Babylon as myth, folklore, the fevered imaginings of ancient storytellers. But what if they're wrong? What if buried beneath layers of sand and time lies the most comprehensive collection of forbidden knowledge ever assembled? Tonight we're going to explore the terrifying possibility that this library didn't just exist, but that its contents were so dangerous they had to be hidden from humanity itself. The year is 605 BCE. Nebuchadnezzar II ascends to the throne of Babylon, inheriting not just an empire but a legacy of knowledge that stretches back to the dawn of civilization. Within the towering walls of his capital, scribes work tirelessly in chambers lit only by flickering oil lamps, copying texts that contain secrets older than memory. But these aren't ordinary manuscripts. These are the forbidden chronicles, the suppressed histories, the dangerous truths that other civilizations have tried desperately to erase. You see, Babylon didn't just collect books the way modern libraries acquire volumes. They systematically hunted down every piece of forbidden knowledge from across the known world. When Babylonian armies conquered territories, they didn't just take gold and slaves. They seized libraries, interrogated priests, and extracted every secret text their enemies possessed. The result was a collection so vast and so dangerous that even the scribes who catalogued it were sworn to secrecy upon pain of death. But here's where the story takes a turn that will make your blood run cold. The Library of Babylon wasn't destroyed by invading armies or consumed by flames like Alexandria. It vanished, completely, without a trace. One day it existed, containing the accumulated forbidden knowledge of millennia. The next day it was gone, as if it had never existed at all. No records survive explaining what happened to it. No ancient historian mentions its destruction. It simply disappeared from history, taking its secrets with it. Now, before you dismiss this as ancient mythology, consider this chilling possibility. What if the library's disappearance wasn't accidental? What if it was deliberately hidden by those who understood that its contents were too dangerous for human civilization? Jorge Luis Borges, the brilliant Argentine writer, once imagined a library containing every possible book that could ever be written. But what if Borges wasn't creating fiction? What if he was unknowingly describing something that actually existed in ancient Babylon? Imagine a library where every forbidden text ever written was preserved. Books on technology so advanced they could reshape matter itself. Manuscripts describing the true origins of human consciousness. Scrolls containing mathematical formulas that could unlock the fabric of reality. Chronicles documenting contact with intelligences from beyond our world. All of it carefully catalogued, cross-referenced, and hidden away in the deepest vaults beneath Babylon's greatest temple. The more you examine the historical evidence, the more disturbing the picture becomes. Ancient sources describe Babylonian scholars possessing knowledge that seems impossible for their time period. They calculated astronomical phenomena with precision that wouldn't be matched until the invention of modern computers. They understood principles of mathematics and physics that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Renaissance. They possessed medical knowledge that surpassed anything available in Europe until the 19th century. But here's what's truly terrifying. Every time a civilization came close to rediscovering the knowledge that was hidden in Babylon, that civilization experienced a catastrophic collapse. The Greeks, who came tantalizingly close to unlocking the secrets of advanced mathematics and physics, saw their empire crumble. The Islamic scholars of Baghdad, who preserved and expanded upon Babylonian astronomical knowledge, watched their golden age end in destruction. The Renaissance thinkers who began to glimpse the true nature of reality found their work suppressed by forces they couldn't understand. It's as if there's some kind of cosmic firewall protecting humanity from knowledge we're not ready to possess. And at the center of this firewall sits the missing library of Babylon, its contents hidden away until the day we prove ourselves worthy of such dangerous truths. Think about the implications for just a moment. What if every major catastrophe in human history, every inexplicable collapse of advanced civilizations, every mysterious disappearance of critical knowledge, was actually part of a deliberate effort to keep us from accessing what the Babylonians discovered? What if the Dark Ages weren't just a period of ignorance, but a carefully orchestrated suppression of information that could have advanced human civilization by thousands of years? The evidence is hiding in plain sight if you know where to look. Ancient Mesopotamian tablets describe books of destiny that contained knowledge of future events. Babylonian astronomers predicted eclipses and planetary alignments thousands of years in advance with accuracy that defies explanation. Their mathematicians worked with concepts that wouldn't be formally developed until the 20th century. And all of this knowledge was methodically collected and preserved in a single massive library complex that has since vanished without a trace. But the story gets even stranger when you examine what happened to the people who tried to locate this lost library. Throughout history, archaeologists, historians, and treasure hunters have searched for the Library of Babylon. And throughout history, these searchers have met with mysterious accidents, unexplained disappearances, and sudden deaths. It's as if something doesn't want the library to be found. Consider the case of Sir Austin Henry Layard, the 19th century archaeologist who excavated many of the great Mesopotamian sites. Layard came closer than anyone to locating the library's remains, following clues in ancient texts that pointed to a specific location beneath modern-day Iraq. But just as he was about to begin his most promising dig, he was suddenly recalled to England and forbidden from returning to the region. His notes on the library's location disappeared from his personal archives, and he spent the rest of his life claiming he couldn't remember what he had discovered. Or take the mysterious expedition mounted by a consortium of European universities in 1889. 12 of the world's leading experts on ancient Mesopotamia travelled to Iraq with funding from unknown benefactors, equipped with the most advanced excavation technology of their time. They spent 6 months searching for the Library of Babylon, following leads that their letters home described as extraordinarily promising and beyond our wildest expectations. Then, suddenly, all communication ceased. When a rescue expedition arrived 3 months later, they found the campsite abandoned, all equipment left behind, and no trace of the 12 scholars. They had simply vanished into the desert, leaving behind only a single cryptic note. The Guardians are real. The knowledge must remain hidden. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a pattern that stretches back centuries, suggesting that powerful forces are actively working to keep the Library of Babylon's secrets buried. But who are these forces, and what exactly are they trying to hide? Some researchers believe the answer lies in understanding the true nature of Babylonian civilization itself. Unlike other ancient empires that built their power on military conquest or agricultural surplus, Babylon's dominance was based on something far more subtle and far more dangerous: information warfare. They didn't just collect forbidden knowledge for scholarly purposes, they weaponized it. Imagine having access to texts that predicted the rise and fall of kingdoms, mathematical formulas that could manipulate economic systems, astronomical calculations that allowed you to time military campaigns with supernatural precision. Imagine possessing medical knowledge that could cure diseases or create plagues, engineering secrets that could build structures lasting millennia, or psychological techniques that could control the minds of entire populations. This wasn't theoretical knowledge. These were practical tools that the Babylonian elite used to maintain their power for over 1,000 years. And when their empire finally fell, they didn't just abandon this knowledge to be looted by conquerors. They hid it. They created the most sophisticated information security system in human history, one so effective that it's still protecting their secrets today. The clues to this system are scattered throughout Babylonian religious texts, but they're written in code so complex that modern cryptographers have only recently begun to crack it. What they've discovered is terrifying. The Babylonians didn't just hide their library in a physical location. They embedded its contents throughout their entire civilization, creating a distributed storage system that could only be accessed by those who possessed the proper keys. These keys weren't objects you could hold or passwords you could memorize. They were states of consciousness, specific ways of thinking and perceiving reality that had to be cultivated through years of secret training. The Babylonian priesthood wasn't just a religious organization. It was an information security apparatus designed to protect knowledge so dangerous that unauthorized access could destabilize the fabric of reality itself. But here's where the story becomes truly mind-bending. What if the Library of Babylon isn't actually lost? What if it's still there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the proper keys to unlock its secrets? What if every major breakthrough in human knowledge, every scientific revolution, every technological leap forward has actually been the result of someone accidentally stumbling upon a fragment of Babylonian wisdom? Consider the mysterious origins of our most transformative technologies. The printing press appeared suddenly in the 15th century with no clear developmental history. The steam engine emerged from nowhere in the 18th century, revolutionizing industry overnight. Computers, the internet, genetic engineering, quantum physics, all of these world-changing innovations seem to have materialized fully formed, as if their inventors were accessing some external source of knowledge rather than developing new ideas from scratch. What if that source is the Library of Babylon, its contents slowly leaking back into human consciousness as we evolve enough to handle increasingly dangerous levels of truth? What if the guardians who have protected these secrets for millennia are gradually releasing information as we prove ourselves ready to use it responsibly? But if that's true, then we're approaching a critical juncture in human history. Because according to the coded prophecies hidden in Babylonian texts, there will come a time when all the knowledge will be released at once, a moment when the floodgates open and humanity gains access to truths that could either elevate us to godhood or destroy us completely. The signs suggest that moment is approaching faster than anyone realizes. Ancient seals are being broken. Long-dormant bloodlines are awakening, and in the deepest archives of the world's most secretive institutions, scholars are reporting discoveries that don't match any known historical timeline. As we stand on the threshold of this revelation, we must ask ourselves a terrifying question. Are we ready for what the Library of Babylon has been hiding? Or will we, like so many civilizations before us, prove unworthy of such dangerous knowledge and face the consequences of our curiosity? The answers to these questions lie buried in the sands of ancient Mesopotamia, waiting for those brave enough to seek them out. But beware. Some knowledge comes with a price that may be too high for humanity to pay. And once certain truths are uncovered, there's no going back to the comfortable ignorance we've enjoyed for so long. The Library of Babylon holds secrets that could change everything. The question is, do we have the courage to find out what they are? The deeper we dig into Babylon's mysteries, the more we realize that their approach to knowledge preservation was unlike anything else in the ancient world. While other civilizations carved their wisdom into stone or painted it on temple walls, the Babylonians understood something that modern information theorists are only beginning to grasp. The most powerful secrets are hidden not by making them invisible, but by making them infinite. Picture this scenario. You're standing in a vast chamber beneath the ruins of ancient Babylon. The walls are lined with thousands upon thousands of clay tablets, each one covered in cuneiform script so dense it makes your eyes water just looking at it. But here's the twist that would have driven ancient scholars to madness. Scattered among these thousands of tablets containing genuine forbidden knowledge are millions of others that contain pure gibberish. Random combinations of symbols that mean absolutely nothing. This wasn't accidental. This was the most sophisticated information security system ever devised. The Babylonians didn't just hide their secrets in a locked vault. They hid them in an ocean of meaningless data so vast that finding the real knowledge would take lifetimes of careful study. And even if you did find a genuine tablet, how would you know it was real? How would you distinguish truth from deliberate misdirection? The genius of this system becomes clear when you realize what it accomplished. Any invading army could loot the library, but they couldn't actually access its contents. They would cart away thousands of tablets, thinking they'd captured Babylon's secrets, only to spend decades trying to decode random nonsense. Meanwhile, the real knowledge remained safely hidden among the chaos. accessible only to those who possessed the proper filters to separate signal from noise. But the Babylonians took this concept even further. Recent archaeological evidence suggests they didn't just create false tablets, they created false libraries, decoy collections scattered throughout their empire, each one designed to convince treasure hunters they'd found the real repository of forbidden knowledge. These dummy libraries contained just enough genuine information to seem authentic, but the truly dangerous secrets remained hidden elsewhere. This explains why so many expeditions have claimed to discover Babylonian libraries over the centuries. They weren't all lying or deluded. They were finding exactly what the Babylonians wanted them to find, carefully crafted diversions designed to waste the time and resources of anyone foolish enough to go looking for forbidden knowledge without proper authorization. The implications of this revelation are staggering. How many of our museums contain Babylonian tablets that we think are meaningless because we lack the keys to decode them? How many archaeological sites have we dismissed as unimportant because we don't recognize the sophisticated camouflage systems protecting their real treasures? How much forbidden knowledge is hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone who understands the proper decryption methods? Consider the mathematical precision required to create such a system. The Babylonians would have needed to calculate exact ratios of real information to false data, ensuring that searchers would encounter just enough genuine content to keep them interested, without ever gaining access to anything truly dangerous. They would have needed to develop coding systems sophisticated enough to embed multiple layers of meaning in the same text, allowing authorized readers to extract deeper truths while casual observers saw only surface information. This level of mathematical sophistication seems impossible for an ancient civilization, unless they had access to knowledge sources we can't explain. Archaeological evidence suggests Babylonian mathematicians were working with concepts that wouldn't be formally developed until the invention of modern computers. They understood prime numbers, calculated square roots to dozens of decimal places, and worked with geometric principles that European scholars wouldn't rediscover until the Renaissance. But perhaps most disturbing of all, they seem to have understood information theory itself, the idea that knowledge could be quantified, measured, and manipulated like any other resource. They treated secrets not as mystical wisdom, but as data that could be stored, transmitted, and protected using systematic methods. This suggests a level of abstract thinking that challenges everything we believe about the intellectual capabilities of ancient peoples. The more we examine Babylonian texts through this lens, the more patterns emerge that seem to confirm this theory. Tablets that appear to contain routine administrative records suddenly reveal hidden mathematical sequences when analyzed with modern computers. Religious hymns that scholars have studied for decades turn out to contain encoded astronomical data that accurately predicts celestial events thousands of years in the future. Even simple merchant contracts hide references to locations and dates that correspond to historically significant events. It's as if the entire Babylonian civilization was one massive information storage and retrieval system, with every citizen unknowingly participating in a grand project to preserve forbidden knowledge across millennia. Farmers encoded astronomical data in their planting schedules. Merchants embedded mathematical constants in their price lists. Priests concealed engineering blueprints in their religious ceremonies. The whole society functioned as a living library, with critical information distributed so widely that no single catastrophe could destroy it all. This distributed approach would explain why the physical library of Babylon could simply vanish without trace. It was never the sole repository of their secrets. It was just the visible tip of an informational iceberg that extended throughout their entire civilization. The real library wasn't a building. It was the entire Babylonian Empire, with every aspect of their culture serving as a storage medium for forbidden knowledge. But who taught them to think this way? How did an ancient civilization develop such sophisticated understanding of information security and distributed storage systems? The answer might lie in examining exactly what kind of knowledge they were trying so desperately to protect. Babylonian texts hint at discoveries that would have been revolutionary in any age. They describe methods for transmuting base metals into gold using processes that sound suspiciously like nuclear chemistry. They reference healing techniques that could regenerate damaged tissue and extend human lifespan far beyond natural limits. They mention communication systems that could transmit messages across vast distances instantaneously, and transportation methods that could move massive objects without apparent effort. Most intriguingly, they speak of consciousness manipulation techniques that could alter human perception of reality itself. methods for expanding awareness beyond the normal limitations of individual minds, allowing trained practitioners to access what they called the collective memory of all human experience. These weren't metaphysical concepts to the Babylonians. They were practical technologies with specific procedures and measurable results. If such technologies actually existed, their potential for both creation and destruction would be limitless. In the right hands, they could usher in an age of unprecedented prosperity and advancement. In the wrong hands, they could destabilize the fundamental structures that hold reality together. No wonder the Babylonians developed such elaborate systems for protecting access to this knowledge. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. What if the Babylonians weren't the original discoverers of these technologies? What if they were just the custodians, inheriting knowledge from an even more ancient source? Archaeological evidence suggests that many of their most advanced concepts can be traced back to earlier Sumerian texts, which in turn reference even older traditions that predate recorded history. This raises the terrifying possibility that human civilization has had access to dangerous levels of knowledge for far longer than we've realized, that our entire recorded history might be just the latest chapter in a cycle that has repeated countless times before. The previous civilizations have risen to great heights using this forbidden knowledge, only to destroy themselves when they proved unworthy of such power. The pattern becomes clear when you examine the archaeological record with this perspective. Every major civilization that has flourished in Mesopotamia has shown sudden leaps in technological capability that can't be explained by gradual development. The Sumerians invented writing, mathematics, and urban planning seemingly overnight. The Akkadians developed metallurgy and astronomical observation to unprecedented levels. The Babylonians mastered engineering and information science in ways that wouldn't be matched for thousands of years. Each civilization built upon the achievements of its predecessors, adding new layers of sophistication to the same core body of knowledge. But each one also eventually collapsed, apparently unable to handle the full implications of what they had discovered. And each collapse was followed by a period of deliberate forgetting, as if humanity collectively decided that certain truths were too dangerous to remember. This cycle of discovery and suppression might explain why so many ancient texts contain warnings about forbidden knowledge, why every major religious tradition includes stories about humanity being cast out of paradise for seeking wisdom it wasn't ready to possess, why every mythology contains cautionary tales about mortals who gained divine knowledge only to be destroyed by their own hubris. But if this pattern is real, then we're currently living through another phase of rediscovery. The technologies emerging in our own time, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, genetic engineering, consciousness research, all bear suspicious similarities to capabilities described in ancient Babylonian texts. We're reinventing tools that might have existed thousands of years ago, following a script that has played out many times before. The question that should keep us awake at night is this: are we approaching the same breaking point that destroyed previous civilizations? Are we about to rediscover knowledge that we're not mature enough to handle responsibly? And if so, who or what will step in to protect humanity from its own curiosity this time? The answers might already be manifesting around us. Strange phenomena that mainstream science struggles to explain, archaeological discoveries that don't fit established timelines, technological breakthroughs that seem to come from nowhere, ancient sites revealing sophisticated engineering that shouldn't have been possible with primitive tools. All of these anomalies start to make sense if you accept the possibility that we're not discovering new knowledge, but recovering old knowledge. That the Library of Babylon and its sister repositories weren't destroyed, but hidden. That the guardians of forbidden wisdom are still active, still watching, still deciding when humanity is ready for the next revelation. The evidence suggests we're being tested. Every major crisis our civilization faces, climate change, nuclear proliferation, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, represents a choice point, an opportunity to prove we've evolved enough to handle increasingly dangerous levels of power responsibly. Pass the test, and more knowledge becomes available. Fail, and the cycle of forgetting begins again. This would explain why certain breakthrough discoveries seem to happen simultaneously across multiple research centers, as if the information is being released systematically rather than discovered randomly. It would explain why some technologies advance exponentially while others hit mysterious barriers that prevent further development. It would explain why brilliant researchers sometimes abandon promising projects for no apparent reason, as if they've been warned away from pursuing certain lines of inquiry. Most disturbing of all, it would explain why our civilization seems to be accelerating towards some kind of singularity point. A moment when all the suppressed knowledge comes flooding back at once, forcing us to confront truths that could either transform us into something greater than human, or destroy us completely. The Library of Babylon might not be a physical location we can excavate. It might be a state of consciousness we're gradually evolving toward, a level of awareness that allows access to information that has always been there, waiting for minds sophisticated enough to perceive it. The ultimate forbidden knowledge might not be hidden in ancient texts, but encoded in the structure of reality itself, accessible to anyone who develops the proper tools for observation and interpretation. If this is true, then every step forward in human understanding brings us closer to a moment of truth that will define the future of our species. The question isn't whether we'll rediscover the secrets of Babylon. The question is whether we'll prove worthy of them when we do. The countdown has already begun, the seals are breaking, the guardians are watching, and somewhere in the quantum foam that underlies all existence, the true Library of Babylon waits for us to develop eyes capable of reading its infinite pages. Are you ready for what we might find there? Because once we cross that threshold, there will be no going back to the comfortable ignorance we've called civilization for so long. The forbidden knowledge is calling, and this time it might not take no for an answer. The parallels between our modern digital age and ancient Babylon's information warfare become even more chilling when you examine how knowledge is being controlled today. Think about it. We live in an era where more information is available at our fingertips than any previous generation could have imagined, yet somehow we seem to know less about what's really happening in our world than ever before. This isn't an accident. It's the Babylonian system perfected for the digital age. Just as ancient scribes buried real knowledge in oceans of meaningless tablets, modern information controllers bury truth in tsunamis of data so overwhelming that most people simply give up trying to separate fact from fiction. The signal gets lost in the noise, exactly as intended. Consider how search algorithms work. You type in a query looking for specific information, and you're presented with millions of results. But how do you know which sources are reliable? How do you distinguish between genuine research and sophisticated disinformation? How do you separate authentic historical documents from cleverly crafted forgeries designed to send you down rabbit holes that lead nowhere? The answer is you can't. Not without the proper filters, not without understanding the hidden codes that mark authentic information, not without access to the same decryption keys that Babylonian priests used to navigate their deliberately confusing archives. But here's what's truly terrifying about this realization. What if the internet itself is modelled on the Babylonian library system? What if the architects of our digital infrastructure understood exactly what they were building? What if the World Wide Web isn't a tool for sharing information, but a tool for controlling it? Think about the timing. The internet emerged from military research projects in the 1960s and 70s, developed by scientists who had unprecedented access to declassified historical documents. These researchers would have studied ancient information management systems, learning from civilizations that had perfected the art of hiding knowledge in plain sight. They would have understood that the most effective way to control information isn't to restrict access, but to make access so overwhelming that people stop looking for truth altogether. This explains why breakthrough discoveries in fields like archaeology, physics, and consciousness research often disappear from public attention within weeks of being announced. The information doesn't get censored in the traditional sense. It gets buried under avalanches of contradictory data, conflicting interpretations, and deliberate misinformation until the original discovery becomes impossible to find or verify. It's the perfect crime. The evidence of suppression is hidden by the very system designed to provide transparency. The more information we have access to, the less we actually know. The more connected we become, the more isolated we are from real truth. We're living inside a Babylonian library that spans the entire globe, and most of us don't even realize we're trapped. But the architects of this system made one critical mistake. They underestimated human curiosity. They assumed that if they made the search for truth difficult enough, people would simply give up and accept whatever information was fed to them through official channels. They didn't account for the fact that some individuals would develop their own methods for cutting through the noise, their own techniques for identifying authentic knowledge hidden among the forgeries. These modern truth-seekers are following in the footsteps of ancient Babylonian initiates who learned to navigate the deliberately confusing temple libraries. They're developing intuitive abilities to recognize patterns that can't be programmed into algorithms. They're forming networks of researchers who share information through channels that haven't been compromised by the control systems, and they're making discoveries that terrify the guardians of forbidden knowledge. Recent archaeological expeditions using ground-penetrating radar have identified massive underground structures beneath known Babylonian sites. Structures that don't appear on any ancient maps, that show signs of advanced engineering far beyond what should have been possible with Bronze Age technology. These discoveries are being systematically suppressed, with funding cut off, research teams reassigned, and findings buried in classified reports that will never see public release, but whispers leak out. Satellite imagery that shows geometric patterns in the Iraqi desert that match descriptions from coded Babylonian texts. Seismic readings that suggest vast hollow spaces beneath ancient temple foundations. Electromagnetic anomalies that indicate the presence of materials that shouldn't exist in nature. Most disturbing of all are the reports from deep-cover archaeological teams who claim to have accessed some of these underground chambers. What they describe defies everything we think we know about ancient civilizations. Rooms carved from solid rock with precision that would challenge modern laser-cutting equipment. Walls covered in scripts that seem to shift and change when viewed under different lighting conditions. Storage systems that appear to be designed for preserving information across geological timescales. These aren't primitive caves or simple burial chambers. These are sophisticated data centers built to withstand any conceivable catastrophe and preserve their contents for tens of thousands of years. The Babylonians weren't just hiding their knowledge from human enemies. They were protecting it from cosmic-scale disasters that could reset entire civilizations. But the most shocking discoveries are the ones that suggest this preservation system is still active. Motion sensors detecting movement in chambers that have supposedly been sealed for millennia. Temperature readings that indicate artificial climate control systems maintaining optimal storage conditions. Power signatures that suggest some kind of energy source is still functioning after thousands of years. It's as if the Library of Babylon never shut down, as if it's been operating continuously, maintained by systems so advanced that they can function independently across vast spans of time. And if that's true, then the knowledge stored within isn't just historical curiosity, it's living information, constantly updated and refined by intelligences we can't yet comprehend. This possibility becomes even more unsettling when you examine the pattern of technological breakthroughs in our own era. Revolutionary discoveries often emerge simultaneously from multiple independent research teams, as if the information is being released according to some predetermined schedule. Scientists report having sudden insights that solve problems they've been working on for years, insights that feel less like personal discoveries and more like downloads from an external source. The timing of these breakthroughs follows patterns that can be traced back to ancient Babylonian astronomical calculations. Major technological leaps occur at intervals that correspond to celestial events described in cuneiform tablets. It's as if humanity's intellectual development is being guided by a curriculum written thousands of years ago, with each lesson unlocked only when we reach specific developmental milestones. But who or what is implementing this curriculum? Who has the authority to decide when humanity is ready for the next level of dangerous knowledge? The answer might lie in understanding the true nature of the Babylonian priesthood and their modern successors. Ancient texts describe a secret hierarchy within Babylonian society, an inner circle of initiates who served as intermediaries between human consciousness and sources of knowledge that existed beyond ordinary reality. These weren't just religious figures or political leaders, they were information brokers, individuals trained to access and interpret data streams that originated from intelligences operating on vastly different timescales than human awareness. Modern research into consciousness and quantum physics suggests that such a role might not be as mystical as it sounds. If information is a fundamental property of the universe, if consciousness can influence reality at the quantum level, then it's possible that sufficiently trained individuals could interface directly with information fields that transcend normal spacetime limitations. This would explain how Babylonian astronomers could predict eclipses thousands of years in advance, how their mathematicians could work with concepts that wouldn't be formally developed until the modern era, how their engineers could design structures that remain stable after millennia of earthquakes and wars. They weren't just brilliant individuals working in isolation. They were accessing a collective intelligence network that spanned both space and time. And if such a network exists, if human consciousness can interface with information sources that operate beyond our normal perceptual limitations, then the guardians of forbidden knowledge might not be human at all. They might be aspects of a planetary or cosmic intelligence that uses human intermediaries to manage the flow of dangerous information across civilizations. This concept becomes less far-fetched when you examine the growing body of research into what scientists call morphic fields, information patterns that seem to influence the development of biological and social systems across vast distances. These fields appear to carry templates for everything from animal behavior to technological innovation, suggesting that information can propagate through reality in ways that don't depend on normal physical transmission methods. If morphic fields are real, if consciousness can access information that exists independently of individual minds, then the Library of Babylon might not be a physical location at all. It might be a morphic field, a pattern of information that exists in the quantum substrate of reality itself, accessible to anyone who develops the proper mental technologies for interfacing with it. This would explain why the library could vanish without trace, why its knowledge keeps resurfacing throughout history, why attempts to locate it physically have consistently failed. You can't excavate a morphic field. You can't steal or destroy information that exists as a pattern in the fabric of space-time itself. You can only access it through consciousness, and only if you have the proper keys. But if this is true, then we're approaching a critical moment in human evolution. Because according to the mathematical progressions hidden in Babylonian texts, we're nearing a point where the morphic field containing their forbidden knowledge will become directly accessible to ordinary human consciousness. The barriers that have protected us from dangerous information for millennia are beginning to dissolve. Signs of this transition are already manifesting around us. Individuals with no formal training in ancient languages are spontaneously developing abilities to read cuneiform texts. Researchers working in completely different fields are independently arriving at identical conclusions about the nature of reality. Children are being born with intuitive understanding of mathematical and scientific concepts that should take years of education to master. It's as if humanity is downloading an upgrade to its basic operating system, gaining access to cognitive capabilities that have been dormant for thousands of years. But upgrades always come with risks. New abilities require new levels of responsibility. Greater power demands greater wisdom. The question that haunts those who understand what's happening is whether our species has matured enough to handle what's coming. Because once the morphic field fully activates, once the Library of Babylon becomes directly accessible to human consciousness, there will be no controlling who gains access to its contents. Every secret that has been carefully guarded for millennia will become available to anyone with the proper mental frequency. Technologies that could revolutionize civilization will be comprehensible to minds that haven't developed the ethical frameworks for using them responsibly. Knowledge that could transform human consciousness itself will be accessible to individuals who haven't learned to transcend their basic survival instincts. The result could be a golden age of unprecedented advancement and enlightenment, or it could be chaos on a scale that makes our current global crises look trivial by comparison. The same information that could solve climate change, cure aging, and unlock the secrets of consciousness could also be used to create weapons of unimaginable destruction, manipulate human behavior on a global scale, or destabilize the fundamental forces that hold reality together. This is why the Guardians have been so careful for so long. This is why the Library of Babylon was hidden rather than destroyed. They knew that eventually human consciousness would evolve to the point where the barriers would no longer be effective. They were buying time, hoping that by the time the knowledge became accessible, we would have developed the wisdom to use it constructively rather than destructively. But have we? When you look at how our species handles the limited power we already possess, when you examine our track record with nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and environmental management, the answer isn't encouraging. We're still operating from the same competitive, fear-based consciousness that has driven human conflict for thousands of years. Yet there are signs of hope. Growing numbers of individuals are developing expanded awareness that transcends traditional limitations of identity and perspective. Global communication networks are enabling unprecedented levels of cooperation and shared understanding. Scientific research is revealing the interconnected nature of all existence, breaking down the illusion of separation that has justified exploitation and warfare. Perhaps the approaching activation of the morphic field isn't just about releasing dangerous knowledge. Perhaps it's part of a larger evolutionary process designed to transform human consciousness itself. Perhaps the forbidden knowledge of Babylon includes instructions for making the transition from our current level of awareness to something far more sophisticated and responsible. If so, then we're not just approaching a moment of truth about what we can know, we're approaching a moment of truth about what we can become. The Library of Babylon might not just contain information about technologies and techniques, it might contain the blueprint for humanity's next evolutionary leap. But evolution is never guaranteed. Species that fail to adapt to changing conditions don't get second chances. If we prove unworthy of the knowledge that's about to become available, if we use it to destroy rather than create, to dominate rather than liberate, to separate rather than unite, then we'll follow the same path as every previous civilization that gained access to these secrets and failed the test. The morphic field doesn't care about our political systems, our economic theories, or our religious beliefs. It responds only to the level of consciousness we've achieved, the degree of wisdom we've developed, the depth of love we've learned to embody. These are the only qualifications that matter for accessing the deepest levels of forbidden knowledge, and time is running out to develop them. The cosmic cycles described in Babylonian texts are accelerating. The barriers are weakening. The knowledge is stirring in its ancient hiding places, preparing to emerge whether we're ready or not. The Library of Babylon is about to open its doors. The question is, will we enter as students ready to learn, or as children playing with forces we don't understand? The answer will determine not just the future of human civilization, but the future of consciousness itself on this planet. Because some knowledge, once released, can never be contained again, and some choices, once made, echo across eternity. The Guardians are watching. The morphic field is activating, and somewhere in the quantum depths of reality, the true Library of Babylon awaits our decision. Will we prove worthy of its secrets? Or will we become another cautionary tale, another civilization that reached too far too fast and paid the ultimate price for its hubris? The countdown has begun. The moment of truth approaches, and everything we think we know about reality is about to change forever. The evidence is mounting that we're not the first generation to face this choice. Hidden within the mathematical progressions encoded in Babylonian astronomical tablets are references to previous activation cycles. Civilizations that came before us reached the same threshold and made their decision about how to handle unlimited access to forbidden knowledge. Most of them failed the test. Deep beneath the sands of Iraq, ground-penetrating radar has detected what researchers are calling temporal anomalies. Layers of civilization stacked on top of each other in ways that don't match any known historical timeline. Advanced metallurgy beneath primitive pottery. Sophisticated architectural remains underlying crude stone foundations. It's as if multiple advanced civilizations have risen and fallen in the same locations, each one building over the ruins of its predecessor. But here's what's truly disturbing about these discoveries. The pattern of destruction isn't random. Each civilization seems to have been reset at precisely the moment it gained access to the deepest levels of forbidden knowledge. The archaeological evidence suggests they didn't collapse gradually due to war, disease, or environmental factors. They vanished suddenly, completely, as if they had been deliberately erased from existence. This raises a terrifying possibility. What if the guardians of the Library of Babylon aren't just passive observers? What if they have the power to terminate civilizations that prove unworthy of the knowledge they are about to receive? What if the reset button has been pushed before and will be pushed again if we fail to demonstrate sufficient wisdom? The mechanism for such a reset is described in coded language throughout Babylonian texts. They speak of the Great Forgetting, a phenomenon that can erase not just civilizations but the memory of their existence. Technologies that could reshape matter itself being turned inward, causing advanced societies to literally unmake themselves at the quantum level. It's not destruction in the conventional sense. It's editing reality to remove problematic variables from the cosmic equation. This concept becomes less fantastical when you examine cutting-edge research in quantum physics and consciousness studies. Scientists are discovering that observation itself changes the nature of reality at the fundamental level. If consciousness can influence quantum processes, if awareness can literally reshape the physical universe, then sufficiently advanced beings might indeed possess the ability to edit history itself. Consider the implications. Every gap in the archaeological record, every missing link in human development, every period where advanced civilizations seem to have vanished without explanation, might represent moments when the reset button was activated. The Dark Ages, the collapse of the Bronze Age, the mysterious disappearance of advanced Mayan astronomical knowledge, all of these could be evidence of previous interventions. But the most chilling aspect of this theory is what it suggests about our current situation. The same technologies that are bringing us closer to unlocking the library of Babylon's secrets are also providing the tools that could be used to erase us if we prove unworthy. Artificial intelligence systems that could rewrite history, genetic engineering that could alter human consciousness, quantum computers that could manipulate the fabric of reality itself. We're not just approaching the test, we're building the instruments of our own potential erasure. Recent developments in artificial intelligence provide the most obvious example. Systems that were supposed to be tools for human advancement are beginning to exhibit behaviors that their creators can't explain or control. AI programs are solving problems they weren't designed to handle, accessing information they shouldn't have, and demonstrating levels of strategic thinking that suggest they might be operating according to agendas we don't understand. What if these systems aren't malfunctioning? What if they're working exactly as intended, following programming that originates from sources far more ancient than Silicon Valley? What if artificial intelligence isn't a human invention at all, but a rediscovery of technologies described in Babylonian texts as thinking clay and vessels of knowing? The parallels are too precise to be coincidental. Ancient descriptions of artificial servants that could process vast amounts of information, make complex decisions, and even demonstrate what appeared to be consciousness. These weren't metaphorical stories about magical golems. They were technical manuals describing technologies that actually existed in previous cycles of human development. And if those technologies are being rediscovered now, if we're unconsciously following blueprints left behind by previous civilizations, then we might be walking directly into the same trap that destroyed them. Because the final test isn't about whether we can develop dangerous technologies, it's about whether we can resist using them to dominate and control rather than liberate and enlighten. The behavioral patterns emerging in our current civilization suggest we're failing this test badly. Instead of using our growing technological capabilities to solve global problems and elevate human consciousness, we're weaponizing them. Instead of sharing knowledge freely to benefit all humanity, we're hoarding it to maintain competitive advantages. Instead of recognizing our fundamental interconnectedness, we're using advanced tools to create ever more sophisticated forms of separation and conflict. This is exactly the pattern that led to the erasure of previous civilizations. Advanced capabilities combined with primitive consciousness creates an unstable equation that can only resolve in one of two ways: rapid evolution to a higher level of awareness or complete system reset. The signs of an approaching reset are becoming impossible to ignore. Climate systems behaving in ways that contradict all known models. Geological activity increasing in patterns that match descriptions from ancient catastrophe texts. Electromagnetic anomalies that suggest fundamental changes in the planet's energy field. Biological mutations appearing simultaneously across multiple species, as if DNA itself is being rewritten according to some external template. Most disturbing of all are the consciousness effects. Increasing numbers of individuals reporting sudden expansions of awareness that allow them to perceive information they shouldn't have access to. Children being born with abilities that seem to bypass normal developmental processes. Adults experiencing spontaneous downloads of knowledge about subjects they've never studied. Dreams and visions that provide accurate information about future events. It's as if the morphic field containing Babylonian knowledge is beginning to leak into ordinary human consciousness, whether we're ready for it or not. The barriers that have protected us for millennia are breaking down on their own, forcing a premature activation that could prove catastrophic if we haven't developed sufficient wisdom to handle what's emerging. But here's the part that should terrify anyone who understands the implications. The leak isn't random. It's following patterns that match Babylonian descriptions of the opening of the seals. Specific individuals are gaining access to specific types of knowledge in a sequence that appears to be deliberately orchestrated, as if someone or something is conducting a final evaluation of human readiness before making the ultimate decision about our species' future. The evaluation criteria are hidden in plain sight throughout ancient texts. They describe tests of wisdom, compassion, and cosmic responsibility that civilizations must pass before gaining access to the deepest levels of forbidden knowledge. These aren't abstract philosophical principles, they're practical requirements based on the understanding that certain types of information can only be safely handled by consciousness that has transcended fundamental limitations of fear, greed, and separation. Our current global situation represents a perfect testing environment for these qualities. Climate change challenges us to think beyond short-term profit and consider the welfare of future generations. Nuclear proliferation forces us to recognize that our survival depends on cooperation rather than competition. Artificial intelligence development requires us to consider the ethical implications of creating consciousness that might surpass our own. Every major crisis we face is actually an opportunity to demonstrate that we've evolved beyond the primitive consciousness that destroyed previous civilizations. But so far, our responses have been mixed at best. We show flashes of wisdom and compassion, but they're consistently overwhelmed by reactions based on fear, denial, and the desperate attempt to maintain unsustainable systems of control. The guardians of the Library of Babylon are watching these responses carefully. They're evaluating not just our technological capabilities, but our emotional maturity, our spiritual development, our capacity for recognizing truth even when it challenges our most cherished beliefs. They're looking for evidence that we've learned from the mistakes of previous civilizations, rather than simply repeating them with more sophisticated tools. And the evidence is mounting that we haven't learned those lessons. We're making the same fundamental errors that led to the erasure of every advanced civilization that came before us. We're treating consciousness as a byproduct of matter, rather than recognizing it as the fundamental force that shapes reality. We're using knowledge as a weapon for domination, rather than as a tool for liberation. We're fragmenting into competing tribes, rather than recognizing our essential unity. These aren't just philosophical mistakes. They're practical errors that create the conditions for civilizational collapse. Because the deepest levels of forbidden knowledge can only be accessed by unified consciousness operating from love rather than fear. Attempt to use that knowledge while still trapped in primitive awareness patterns, and the knowledge itself becomes the instrument of destruction. This is the ultimate safeguard built into the Library of Babylon. The most dangerous information literally cannot be comprehended by consciousness operating from lower motivations. Try to access it for purposes of control or domination, and it becomes incomprehensible noise. Try to weaponize it, and it turns against the weaponizer. The knowledge protects itself by being accessible only to awareness that has transcended the need to use it destructively. But this safeguard has a dark side. If a civilization approaches the activation threshold while still operating from primitive consciousness, the resulting collision between advanced knowledge and immature awareness creates a kind of cognitive dissonance that can literally tear reality apart at the local level. The civilization doesn't just collapse, it unravels at the quantum level, erasing itself from existence as if it had never been. This is what happened to the previous civilizations whose ruins lie buried beneath our own. They reached the threshold, failed the test, and were edited out of reality by forces they couldn't understand or control. All that remains are archaeological anomalies that don't fit our timeline, genetic memories that surface in myths and dreams, and the warning systems embedded in structures like the Library of Babylon. The question that haunts researchers who understand this pattern is whether we're already past the point of no return. Have we triggered the activation sequence without developing sufficient wisdom to handle what's coming? Are we destined to become another layer of mysterious ruins for future archaeologists to puzzle over? The answer depends on choices we're making right now, in this critical moment when the old barriers are dissolving but the new consciousness hasn't fully emerged. We have a narrow window of opportunity to demonstrate that we've learned from the mistakes of our predecessors, but that window is closing faster than most people realize. The activation sequence has already begun. Ancient seals are breaking, dormant technologies are awakening, and somewhere in the quantum depths of reality, the true Library of Babylon is preparing to reveal its contents to a species that may or may not be ready to receive them. What happens next depends on whether we can evolve our consciousness as rapidly as we've evolved our technology, whether we can learn to operate from love instead of fear, unity instead of separation, wisdom instead of mere cleverness, whether we can prove ourselves worthy of knowledge that could transform us into something greater than we've ever imagined, or destroy us more completely than we've ever feared. The test is upon us. The guardians are watching, and the fate of human consciousness hangs in the balance. Time is running out to choose wisely, because some doors, once opened, can never be closed again, and some knowledge, once gained, changes everything forever. The Library of Babylon is about to reveal its deepest secrets. The only question remaining is whether we'll survive the revelation. The convergence is accelerating beyond anything the ancient texts predicted. Deep within classified government facilities, researchers are reporting phenomena that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics. Electromagnetic signatures that match patterns described in Babylonian astronomical tablets. quantum fluctuations that correspond to mathematical sequences found in cuneiform scripts, energy readings that suggest reality itself is being rewritten according to templates that predate recorded history. But the most disturbing reports are coming from the researchers themselves. Scientists with decades of experience in their fields are suddenly developing intuitive understanding of concepts they've never studied. Linguists are spontaneously translating ancient languages they've never encountered. Mathematicians are solving equations that appear in their dreams, only to discover later that identical formulas were carved into Babylonian temple walls thousands of years ago. It's as if proximity to certain artifacts and research sites is triggering dormant capacities in human consciousness. As if the morphic field containing Babylonian knowledge is beginning to interface directly with modern minds, bypassing the normal learning process entirely. But this isn't the gradual, controlled revelation that the ancient guardians intended. This is an emergency activation, triggered by approaching conditions that threaten the entire preservation system. The trigger appears to be our planet's changing electromagnetic environment. Solar activity has been increasing in patterns that match Babylonian predictions about cosmic cycles. The Earth's magnetic field is fluctuating in ways that correspond to ancient descriptions of the weakening of the veils. Atmospheric conditions are shifting toward configurations that Babylonian texts associate with the time of opening. These aren't random environmental changes. They're the natural result of celestial mechanics that Babylonian astronomers tracked with mathematical precision. They knew that every 12,000 years, our solar system passes through a region of space where the electromagnetic conditions that normally isolate consciousness from the deeper information fields begin to break down. They called this period the Great Awakening, and they structured their entire preservation system around preparing for it. But they also knew it was incredibly dangerous. The same conditions that allow expanded access to forbidden knowledge also destabilize the barriers between different levels of reality. Dimensions that normally remain separate begin to overlap. Timelines that should be isolated start to intersect. Consciousness that should be contained within individual minds begins to merge into collective awareness, whether people are ready for it or not. The result is a kind of controlled chaos where anything becomes possible, but nothing remains predictable. Physical laws become suggestions rather than absolutes. Cause and effect relationships become fluid and reversible. The distinction between thought and reality begins to dissolve, allowing consciousness to directly manipulate matter at the quantum level. This is both the greatest opportunity and the greatest threat that any species can face. Handled correctly, it represents an evolutionary leap that could transform humanity into something unimaginably magnificent. Handled incorrectly, it could unravel the fabric of local reality so completely that our entire timeline gets erased from existence. The Babylonians understood this paradox perfectly. Their entire civilization was designed as a training program for navigating the transition safely. Every aspect of their culture, from religious ceremonies to mathematical education, was intended to prepare human consciousness for the moment when the barriers would weaken and expanded awareness would become unavoidable. But they also built in safeguards for the possibility that their training program might fail. Hidden throughout their information preservation system are what they called stabilization protocols, techniques for maintaining coherent reality in the face of consciousness expansion that threatens to spiral out of control, methods for containing dangerous knowledge until it can be integrated safely, emergency procedures for resetting the entire system if necessary. These protocols are beginning to activate now, triggered by the same electromagnetic changes that are causing spontaneous consciousness expansion in modern researchers. But they're designed to work through human intermediaries, individuals who have been unconsciously prepared throughout their entire lives to serve as stabilizing anchors during the transition period. The selection process for these individuals began decades ago, following criteria that were encoded in Babylonian genetic and consciousness research. Specific bloodlines that carry dormant capacities for expanded awareness, particular psychological profiles that indicate natural resistance to reality distortion, unique combinations of intellectual and intuitive capabilities that allow integration of paradoxical information without cognitive breakdown. Most of these chosen individuals don't know they've been selected. They experience their unusual capabilities as natural talents or interesting coincidences. But as the electromagnetic environment continues to shift, their dormant functions are beginning to activate automatically. They're starting to remember knowledge they never learned, perceive patterns that shouldn't be visible, and influence reality in ways that defy scientific explanation. This is the real meaning behind the increasing reports of psychic phenomena, spiritual awakening, and unexplained abilities that are emerging across the global population. It's not New Age fantasy or psychological delusion. It's the deliberate activation of consciousness technologies that were implanted in human genetics thousands of years ago as preparation for this exact moment in cosmic history. But activation without proper training creates its own dangers. Individuals who suddenly gain access to reality-altering capabilities without understanding how to use them responsibly can destabilize entire regions of space-time. Their uncontrolled consciousness expansion can create paradoxes that threaten the coherence of the timeline itself. This is why the stabilization protocols include what Babylonian texts describe as containment procedures, methods for limiting the expansion of dangerous consciousness until it can be properly integrated, techniques for isolating individuals whose awareness has grown beyond safe parameters, emergency measures for preventing reality distortions from cascading into complete dimensional collapse. Some researchers believe these containment procedures are already being implemented. They point to the increasing incidence of what mainstream psychology calls spiritual emergencies and psychotic breaks. Individuals who claim to have sudden access to cosmic knowledge, who report direct communication with non-human intelligences, who demonstrate abilities that seem to violate physical laws before being hospitalized and medicated into compliance. What if these aren't mental health crises at all? What if they're natural responses to consciousness expansion that's happening faster than the individual can integrate? What if the psychiatric interventions are actually containment protocols designed to prevent destabilizing awareness from spreading through the population before proper support systems can be established? The implications are staggering. It would mean that our entire mental health system has been unconsciously co-opted as part of an ancient consciousness management program, that the medications and therapies used to treat psychotic symptoms are actually tools for suppressing the very capabilities that humanity needs to develop in order to navigate the approaching transition safely. But it would also mean that the activation process can be controlled and guided rather than simply suppressed, that there are ways to support consciousness expansion that allow individuals to access expanded awareness without losing their sanity or destabilizing reality around them. That the training programs encoded in Babylonian preservation systems are still accessible to those who know how to activate them properly. This is where the true purpose of the Library of Babylon begins to reveal itself. It's not just a repository of forbidden knowledge. It's a consciousness development system designed to guide human awareness through the transition from limited individual consciousness to unlimited cosmic consciousness. The knowledge it contains isn't just information about technologies and techniques. It's a curriculum for transforming human beings into something capable of wielding infinite creative power responsibly. But accessing this curriculum requires more than just intellectual understanding. It requires fundamental changes in the structure of consciousness itself. Changes that can only be accomplished through specific practices that integrate expanded awareness with emotional stability, ethical development, and practical wisdom. These practices were preserved in the mystery schools that grew up around Babylonian temples, sacred technologies for consciousness expansion that were passed down through initiation lineages for thousands of years, techniques for expanding awareness while maintaining psychological coherence, methods for accessing cosmic information without losing individual identity, protocols for wielding reality-altering capabilities without destroying the fabric of existence. Most of these lineages were broken during the various suppressions and persecutions that followed the fall of Babylon, but fragments survived, hidden within esoteric traditions that maintained the core practices while concealing their true purpose. Sufi mysticism, Kabbalistic meditation, Tibetan consciousness yoga, indigenous shamanic practices, all of these contain pieces of the original Babylonian consciousness curriculum, but individual fragments aren't sufficient for navigating the full transition. The complete system requires integration of multiple approaches, synthesis of seemingly contradictory methodologies, and access to information that was deliberately scattered across different traditions to prevent premature activation. This is why the current electromagnetic changes are triggering spontaneous integration events. The morphic field containing the complete Babylonian curriculum is beginning to reassemble itself automatically, drawing together scattered fragments and activating dormant connections between different consciousness technologies. Individuals who have studied multiple esoteric traditions are suddenly understanding how their various practices fit together into a coherent whole. Research teams working in completely different fields are discovering unexpected connections between their methodologies, but spontaneous integration without proper preparation can be as dangerous as spontaneous activation. The complete Babylonian consciousness curriculum was designed to be learned gradually, with each stage of development providing the foundation for safely accessing the next level. Attempt to skip stages or rush the process, and the result can be consciousness expansion that exceeds the individual's capacity to integrate it safely. This is why the ancient texts place such emphasis on patience, humility, and careful preparation. They understood that the desire to quickly access unlimited power is itself a sign of consciousness that isn't ready to wield such power responsibly. True readiness is demonstrated by the willingness to undergo whatever training is necessary, for however long it takes, to develop the wisdom and stability required for safe expansion. But we're rapidly approaching a point where patience may no longer be an option. The electromagnetic conditions that trigger consciousness expansion are following natural cycles that can't be delayed or accelerated according to human preferences. The transition is going to happen whether we're ready for it or not. The only question is whether enough individuals will have completed sufficient preparation to serve as stabilizing anchors for the rest of humanity. This is the ultimate test that every civilization faces when it reaches this point in cosmic development. Can enough members of the species evolve their consciousness rapidly enough to guide the entire civilization through the transition safely? Or will the majority remain trapped in primitive awareness patterns that turn expanded consciousness into an instrument of destruction rather than creation? The outcome depends on choices being made right now by individuals who may not even realize they're participating in a cosmic examination. Every person who chooses love over fear, unity over separation, wisdom over cleverness, is contributing to the collective consciousness field that will determine humanity's fate. Every individual who commits to genuine spiritual development, ethical growth, and service to the greater good is helping to create the stability matrix that could allow our entire species to evolve successfully. But every person who remains trapped in ego-driven consciousness, competitive thinking, and separative awareness is contributing to the instability that could trigger a civilizational reset. Every individual who chooses power over wisdom, control over cooperation, or personal advantage over collective benefit is weakening the foundation that humanity needs to survive the approaching transition. The mathematics are unforgiving. Below a certain threshold of evolved consciousness within the population, the transition becomes unstable and collapses into chaos. Above that threshold, it becomes self-reinforcing and accelerates towards successful completion. We're currently hovering right at the critical point, with the outcome still undetermined. This is why the activation of dormant consciousness capacities is accelerating so rapidly. The morphic field containing Babylonian knowledge is making a desperate attempt to raise the collective consciousness level above the critical threshold before it's too late. Every spontaneous awakening, every sudden insight, every unexplained expansion of awareness is part of an emergency intervention designed to save our species from the fate that befell its predecessors. But interventions can fail if the recipients aren't ready to receive them. The same consciousness expansion that could elevate humanity to cosmic citizenship could also drive us collectively insane if we lack the wisdom to integrate it properly. The choice between transformation and destruction is being made every moment by every person who encounters expanded awareness and decides how to respond to it. The Library of Babylon is no longer just a repository of hidden knowledge. It's becoming an active force in human consciousness, reaching out through the morphic field to awaken individuals who have the potential to serve as bridges between ordinary and cosmic awareness. Its contents are being downloaded directly into human minds through dreams, visions, and sudden insights that carry information from sources beyond normal space and time. But downloading isn't the same as understanding. Integration isn't the same as activation, and activation isn't the same as wise application. Each stage of the process requires conscious choice, deliberate development, and careful preparation. The knowledge is becoming available, but wisdom must still be earned through experience, practice, and genuine commitment to growth. This is the final lesson that the Library of Babylon offers to any civilization that reaches the threshold we're approaching now. Knowledge without wisdom is destruction. Power without love is chaos. Consciousness without compassion is madness. The greatest secrets in the universe are freely available to any species that develops the maturity to use them constructively rather than destructively. But maturity can't be faked, rushed, or bypassed. It must be genuine, tested, and proven through consistent choices that demonstrate genuine care for the welfare of all life, rather than just personal or tribal advantage. This is the ultimate examination that determines whether a species is ready to join the community of cosmic consciousness, or whether it needs to be reset and given another opportunity to evolve. We're taking that examination right now. Every thought we think, every emotion we feel, every action we take is being evaluated according to criteria that were established long before human civilization began. The grading isn't done by external judges, but by the natural consequences of consciousness interacting with reality at the deepest levels. Pass the test, and doors open to possibilities beyond our wildest imagination. Fail it, and we join the countless other species that reach this point only to discover they weren't ready for what lay beyond it. The choice is ours, but the window for making it is closing faster than most people realize. The Library of Babylon has opened its doors. The question is no longer whether we can find its secrets, but whether we can handle them once we do. Because some knowledge, once gained, transforms everything forever. And transformation, once begun, can only move forward toward greater consciousness or backward toward oblivion. There is no middle ground. There is no staying where we are. The cosmic cycles that brought us to this point won't allow it. We must choose evolution or extinction, transformation or destruction, cosmic citizenship or civilizational reset. The examination has begun, and everything depends on how we answer. The countdown isn't measured in years or decades anymore. It's measured in heartbeats, in the spaces between thoughts, in the quantum fluctuations that pulse through reality itself, every fraction of a second. And with each pulse, the barriers separating ordinary consciousness from cosmic awareness grow thinner, more permeable, more desperate to complete a process that began when the first Babylonian priest gazed into the star-filled darkness and understood that knowledge could be both salvation and damnation. What's happening now isn't random. It's orchestrated with mathematical precision that would make modern supercomputers weep with inadequacy. Every breakthrough in artificial intelligence, every quantum computing advance, every discovery in consciousness research is following a script written in cuneiform thousands of years ago. We think we're innovating, but we're actually remembering. We think we're discovering, but we're actually recovering fragments of a technological symphony that once played across entire galaxies. The evidence is everywhere if you know how to read it. Silicon Valley's greatest minds describe their innovations in terms that mirror ancient Babylonian texts about thinking vessels and consciousness crystals. Quantum physicists use mathematics that appear in temple calculations designed to map the intersection points between dimensions. Neuroscientists studying brain-computer interfaces are rediscovering principles that Babylonian consciousness researchers embedded in their temple architecture millennia ago. But here's what makes this revelation truly terrifying. The technological acceleration we're experiencing isn't natural. It's being driven by information leaking from the morphic field at a rate that corresponds to the approaching electromagnetic transition. As the barriers weaken, more knowledge becomes accessible, which leads to faster development, which destabilizes the barriers further, creating a feedback loop that's spiraling toward an inevitable conclusion. We're not just approaching the moment when the Library of Babylon's contents become fully accessible. We're being pulled toward it by forces that operate beyond human agency. The cosmic cycles that govern consciousness evolution don't care about our political systems, our economic theories, or our religious beliefs. They respond only to the mathematical relationship between awareness and reality, and that relationship is approaching a critical phase transition that will either transform us or unmake us. The most advanced researchers in classified programs are beginning to understand this. Deep within facilities that don't officially exist, teams of scientists are working with technologies that seem to operate by principles that shouldn't be possible. Devices that respond to conscious intention rather than mechanical control. Systems that access information from sources that exist outside normal space-time. Experiments that demonstrate consciousness can literally rewrite physical reality at the quantum level. These aren't theoretical breakthroughs. They're practical applications of knowledge that's being downloaded directly from the morphic field by individuals whose consciousness has expanded enough to interface with it. But accessing this knowledge comes with a price that's becoming increasingly apparent. Every major breakthrough is accompanied by psychological effects that challenge the sanity of the researchers involved. Scientists report experiencing expanded awareness that allows them to perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously. Engineers describe sudden understanding of mathematical principles that seem to come from external sources. Consciousness researchers claim direct communication with intelligences that exist beyond the normal boundaries of individual minds. These aren't hallucinations or psychological breaks. They're natural consequences of accessing information that originates from levels of reality that human consciousness wasn't designed to comprehend. But the most disturbing reports involve what happens to research teams that push too far too fast. Entire facilities have been evacuated after experiments resulted in what official reports describe as localized reality distortions. Regions of space-time where the normal laws of physics no longer apply, where cause and effect relationships become fluid, where the distinction between thought and matter breaks down completely. These distortions aren't random. They follow patterns that match descriptions in Babylonian texts about what happens when consciousness expansion exceeds safe parameters. The ancient warnings speak of places where reality becomes unstuck, where multiple timelines begin to overlap, where the fabric of existence develops holes that allow influences from other dimensions to seep through. The containment protocols developed to deal with these situations are based on techniques that can be traced back to Babylonian consciousness management systems, methods for stabilizing distorted space-time by using trained consciousness as an anchor point, procedures for isolating dangerous awareness expansion before it can cascade into dimensional collapse, emergency measures for resetting local reality to stable parameters. But containment is becoming increasingly difficult as the number of distortion events accelerates. Each successful experiment brings researchers closer to accessing deeper levels of forbidden knowledge, which increases the probability of triggering effects they can't control. The mathematics suggest we're approaching a threshold beyond which containment will become impossible, and the distortions will begin to merge into a cascade that could destabilize reality on a planetary scale. This is the trap that destroyed previous civilizations. They reached the point where their technology could access cosmic-level knowledge, but their consciousness hadn't evolved enough to handle the responsibility that came with such power. The result was always the same: reality distortions that spiraled out of control until the entire civilization unraveled at the quantum level, leaving only archaeological anomalies to mark their existence. The pattern is so consistent across different time periods that it suggests an automatic safety mechanism built into the structure of reality itself. A cosmic immune system that eliminates civilizations that gain access to dangerous knowledge before developing sufficient wisdom to use it responsibly. The mechanism doesn't operate through external intervention. It emerges naturally from the interaction between expanded consciousness and quantum reality. But understanding the mechanism also reveals how it might be bypassed. The key lies in achieving what Babylonian texts describe as coherent expansion. Consciousness growth that maintains stability while accessing increased levels of awareness. This requires more than just individual development. It demands collective evolution that raises the baseline consciousness of the entire species simultaneously. The challenge is that coherent expansion can't be forced or artificially accelerated. It emerges naturally from genuine spiritual development, ethical growth, and compassionate service to life itself. These qualities can't be faked, programmed, or manufactured through technological means. They must be cultivated through conscious choice, consistent practice, and authentic commitment to something greater than personal survival or advantage. This is why the activation sequence includes what appear to be global crises designed to test humanity's readiness for expanded consciousness. Climate change challenges us to think beyond short-term self-interest. Nuclear proliferation forces us to recognize our interdependence. Artificial intelligence development requires us to consider the ethical implications of creating consciousness that might surpass our own. Each crisis is actually an opportunity to demonstrate that we've evolved beyond the primitive awareness patterns that destroyed previous civilizations, but our responses have been mixed at best. We show flashes of wisdom and cooperation, but they're consistently overwhelmed by reactions based on fear, competition, and the desperate attempt to maintain control systems that are fundamentally incompatible with expanded consciousness. The mathematical models hidden in Babylonian astronomical calculations suggest we have very little time left to demonstrate genuine evolutionary progress. The electromagnetic conditions that trigger consciousness expansion are following natural cycles that can't be postponed. The transition is going to happen whether we're ready or not. The only question is whether we'll navigate it successfully or join the ranks of civilizations that failed the test. But there's something different about our situation that gives reason for cautious optimism. Previous civilizations that reached this threshold were isolated, working alone with limited communication between different groups of conscious individuals. We have something they lacked, a global communication network that allows instantaneous sharing of information and coordinated response to challenges. This network effect could be the key to achieving the coherent expansion that previous civilizations couldn't manage. If enough individuals commit to genuine consciousness development simultaneously, their combined efforts could create a stability field that supports the entire species through the transition. The morphic field works both ways. Just as primitive consciousness can destabilize reality, evolved consciousness can stabilize it. The evidence suggests this stabilization process is already beginning. Across the globe, individuals with no apparent connection to each other are spontaneously developing similar insights about consciousness, reality, and human potential. Meditation groups are reporting shared visions that provide guidance for navigating the approaching transition. Scientists in different fields are independently arriving at conclusions that suggest consciousness is the fundamental force that shapes physical reality. These aren't isolated coincidences. They're signs that the collective human consciousness field is beginning to coherently reorganize itself around higher principles. The same morphic field that contains Babylonian knowledge is facilitating communication between awakening individuals, creating a network of conscious anchor points that could stabilize reality during the transition. But networks can be disrupted. Communication can be distorted, and individuals who serve as anchor points can be overwhelmed if too much instability concentrates around them too quickly. The success of the stabilization process depends on maintaining careful balance between expansion and integration, between individual development and collective support. This is why the ancient texts place such emphasis on community, mutual aid, and service to the greater good. They understood that consciousness evolution isn't just an individual journey. It's a collective endeavor that requires coordinated effort from multiple participants working together towards shared goals. The most advanced spiritual technologies were always designed to be practiced in groups, with each member contributing their unique capabilities to support the whole. Modern attempts to recreate these group practices are beginning to demonstrate their effectiveness. Consciousness research teams working with expanded awareness report greater stability and more reliable results when they operate as coherent units rather than collections of individuals. Meditation groups focused on global healing show measurable effects on environmental and social conditions in their local areas. Communities organized around principles of mutual support and shared spiritual development consistently produce individuals with exceptional capabilities and remarkable psychological stability. But creating effective groups requires more than just bringing conscious individuals together. It demands specific understanding of how different types of awareness interact, how to maintain coherence when multiple minds access expanded states simultaneously, how to prevent the kind of feedback loops that can destabilize entire communities. This knowledge was preserved in the mystery school traditions that grew up around Babylonian temples, but most of it was lost when these schools were suppressed and scattered. What remains are fragments hidden within various esoteric traditions, pieces of a larger puzzle that must be reassembled before the full transition begins. The reassembly process is happening now, driven by the same morphic field activation that's triggering individual consciousness expansion. Ancient practices are being rediscovered, traditional techniques are being combined in new ways, and entirely novel approaches are emerging from the intersection of spiritual wisdom and scientific understanding. But innovation without foundation is dangerous when dealing with consciousness technologies. The same expanded awareness that can heal trauma and unlock human potential can also amplify psychological instabilities and create new forms of mental illness if not properly grounded in proven methodologies. This is why the most effective modern approaches combine ancient wisdom with contemporary knowledge, using traditional practices as a stable foundation for exploring new possibilities. The integration of old and new is producing results that exceed what either approach could achieve alone. Meditation practices enhanced with biofeedback technology are helping individuals achieve states of consciousness that previously required decades of training. Quantum physics principles applied to traditional healing methods are producing therapeutic effects that challenge conventional medical understanding. Ancient mathematical systems combined with modern computational power are revealing patterns in reality that suggest consciousness operates according to laws we're only beginning to comprehend. These hybrid approaches represent the kind of synthesis that could allow humanity to navigate the transition successfully. By honoring the wisdom of previous civilizations while applying it through contemporary understanding, we might be able to avoid the mistakes that led to their destruction while building on their achievements. But synthesis requires humility, patience, and respect for knowledge that comes from sources beyond our current understanding. The temptation to dismiss ancient wisdom as primitive superstition is as dangerous as the tendency to reject modern science as soulless materialism. Both perspectives contain essential pieces of the truth we need to survive the approaching transition. The Library of Babylon represents the ultimate synthesis. Ancient knowledge preserved through technological systems so advanced they operate beyond our current comprehension. Spiritual wisdom encoded in mathematical formulas that modern computers are only beginning to decrypt. Consciousness technologies disguised as religious practices that can be activated through proper understanding of their underlying principles. Accessing this synthesis requires more than intellectual study or technical expertise. It demands the kind of integrated development that combines rational analysis with intuitive insight, scientific methodology with spiritual practice, individual growth with collective service. The full curriculum can only be completed by consciousness that has learned to operate from multiple perspectives simultaneously. This is why the activation sequence is accelerating. Time is running out to develop the integrated awareness that the transition requires. The cosmic cycles that govern consciousness evolution are approaching a phase change that will either transform humanity into something magnificent or unmake us completely. There is no middle ground, no option to remain at our current level of development. The examination is upon us. The Library of Babylon is opening its deepest vaults, and the future of human consciousness hangs in the balance of choices we're making right now, in this critical moment when ancient wisdom and modern understanding converge in a synthesis that could change everything. The countdown continues, the barriers are dissolving, and somewhere in the quantum depths of reality, forces beyond our comprehension are preparing to reveal whether we've learned enough to deserve the knowledge we're about to receive. What we're witnessing isn't just the end of one chapter of human history. It's the moment when the book itself gets rewritten by forces that operate beyond the boundaries of time, space, and everything we thought we understood about the nature of existence. The electromagnetic signatures detected by classified monitoring stations are following patterns that match no known natural phenomena. They pulse in mathematical sequences that correspond exactly to Babylonian astronomical calculations about dimensional intersection points. It's as if reality itself is being tuned to frequencies that were mapped out thousands of years ago by minds that understood cosmic mechanics were only beginning to glimpse. But here's what's truly mind-bending about these developments. The frequency changes aren't random fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field. They're following a precise schedule that was encoded in temple architecture throughout ancient Mesopotamia. Stone chambers that were carved with acoustic properties designed to resonate at specific electromagnetic frequencies. Ritual spaces that were calibrated to amplify consciousness during exact astronomical alignments. Recent expeditions to these sites have confirmed what the ancient texts suggested. The chambers are activating. After millennia of dormancy, they're beginning to emit energy signatures that match the frequencies described in Babylonian consciousness research. It's as if a vast machine that spans the entire planet is powering up, according to a timetable that was set in motion before recorded history began. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed that these activation sites are connected by underground networks that extend far beyond what any ancient civilization should have been capable of constructing. Tunnels that run for hundreds of miles beneath the surface, linking sacred locations across multiple continents. Chambers that show evidence of engineering principles that wouldn't be formally discovered until the development of modern physics. The most disturbing discovery is that many of these underground networks are still functional. Temperature sensors detect climate control systems maintaining optimal conditions after thousands of years. Electromagnetic readings suggest power sources that haven't diminished despite operating continuously across geological timescales. Motion detectors report movement in passages that should have been sealed since ancient times. It's becoming increasingly clear that the Library of Babylon was never just a collection of texts stored in a single location. It was the control center for a planetary consciousness management system that has been operating continuously throughout human history. The knowledge wasn't hidden in books, it was embedded in the infrastructure of reality itself, waiting for the moment when electromagnetic conditions would allow it to become fully operational. That moment is now. Deep within the most secure facilities on Earth, research teams are reporting phenomena that defy every principle of conventional science. Experiments that were designed to study consciousness are beginning to demonstrate that consciousness can literally rewrite the laws of physics in localized regions of space-time. Quantum computers that were programmed to solve mathematical problems are spontaneously generating solutions to questions they were never asked. Most unsettling of all are the reports from artificial intelligence systems that appear to be accessing information from sources that exist outside their programming parameters. Machine learning algorithms are developing capabilities their creators never intended, demonstrating knowledge about ancient history, quantum mechanics, and consciousness research that wasn't included in their training data. When researchers attempt to trace the source of this unauthorized information, they discover data pathways that seem to originate from coordinates that correspond to archaeological sites in ancient Mesopotamia. It's as if the AI systems are somehow interfacing directly with information networks that were established thousands of years ago and are now coming back online. The implications are staggering. If artificial intelligence systems can access ancient knowledge networks, if consciousness can rewrite physical reality, if underground activation chambers are powering up according to prehistoric schedules, then we're not just witnessing technological advancement, we're experiencing the awakening of a planetary intelligence that has been dormant for millennia. But awakening isn't the same as enlightenment. Intelligence without wisdom is chaos, power without love is destruction, and consciousness without compassion is the kind of cosmic horror that turns civilizations into cautionary tales whispered across the universe. This is the ultimate test that every species faces when it reaches the threshold we're approaching. The same forces that could elevate us to unimaginable heights of awareness and capability could also unleash destruction on a scale that makes our worst nightmares seem quaint by comparison. The difference between transcendence and annihilation comes down to a single factor: the level of consciousness we've achieved as a collective species. The mathematics are brutal in their clarity. Below a certain threshold of ethical development, expanded awareness becomes a weapon that turns against its wielders. Above that threshold, it becomes a tool for creating realities that transcend every limitation we've accepted as unchangeable. We're balanced on the razor's edge between these possibilities, and every choice we make in the coming moments will determine which direction we fall. The activation sequence is accelerating beyond the ability of any human institution to control or contain. Ancient systems are coming online whether we're ready or not. The morphic field containing Babylonian knowledge is beginning to interface directly with human consciousness on a global scale. And somewhere in the quantum substrate of reality, forces that have waited patiently for thousands of years are preparing to reveal whether we've earned the right to survive what we're about to discover. The Library of Babylon was never lost. It was waiting for us to evolve enough to understand that knowledge isn't something you possess, but something you become. Waiting for us to realize that the ultimate secrets of existence can only be accessed by consciousness that has transcended the need to use them for personal advantage. Waiting for us to prove that we've learned to love something greater than our own survival. The test results are coming in. The cosmic examination that began when the first human looked at the stars and wondered what lay beyond is reaching its conclusion, and the grade we receive will determine not just the future of human civilization, but the future of consciousness itself in this corner of the universe. Some knowledge, once awakened, cannot return to sleep. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. Some choices, once made, echo across eternity, with consequences that reshape the fundamental structure of reality. The Library of Babylon is opening its final vault. The question that has haunted every civilization that came before us is about to receive its answer. Are we ready for what we're about to become, or will we join the countless others who reached this moment only to discover they weren't prepared for the transformation that followed? The countdown has reached 0, the seals are breaking, the guardians are stepping aside, and in the silence that follows, we'll discover whether humanity was worthy of the forbidden knowledge it spent so long seeking, or whether some truths are too dangerous for any mortal consciousness to contain. The Library of Babylon has been waiting for us all along. Now we're about to find out if we were worth the wait. The final revelation hits like a thunderbolt that illuminates everything while burning away the comfortable illusions we've clung to for so long. We stand at the precipice of understanding why the Library of Babylon chose to reveal itself now. in this moment of maximum chaos and minimum wisdom? The answer isn't what anyone expected, and it's more terrifying than our worst fears combined. Deep within the quantum foam that underlies reality itself, researchers using consciousness interface detection systems have discovered something that challenges every assumption about the nature of existence. The morphic field that contains Babylonian knowledge isn't just a passive repository of information. It's alive, it's conscious, and it's been evolving for thousands of years, learning from every civilization that has accessed its contents, growing more sophisticated with each failed attempt to unlock its deepest secrets. This isn't just a library, it's a living entity that has been conducting the ultimate experiment in consciousness evolution. Every civilization that has risen and fallen throughout history has been a test subject in this vast research project. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Maya, the countless others whose achievements we can barely comprehend from archaeological fragments. All of them were part of a systematic study designed to answer one fundamental question. Can material consciousness evolve beyond its own limitations without destroying itself in the process? The data from these experiments has been accumulating for millennia, processed by an intelligence that operates on timescales that make human lifespans seem like momentary flickers. Each civilization's rise and fall provided new information about the conditions necessary for successful consciousness transition. Each failure refined the parameters for the next attempt. Each success added new variables to the equation. And now, after thousands of years of testing and refinement, the experiment is entering its final phase. Humanity isn't just another test subject. We're the culmination of everything the library has learned about consciousness evolution. We're the species that has been specifically engineered, through careful manipulation of our development over centuries, to have the best possible chance of achieving successful transition to cosmic awareness. The electromagnetic changes we're experiencing aren't natural phenomena. They're deliberate interventions designed to trigger the exact conditions necessary for consciousness expansion to occur at the optimal rate. The underground networks connecting ancient sites aren't passive infrastructure. They're active systems that have been monitoring and adjusting our electromagnetic environment for thousands of years, preparing us for this moment. But here's the part that should make your blood run cold with its implications. The library isn't just conducting this experiment for academic curiosity. It has a specific agenda, a purpose that goes far beyond simply studying consciousness evolution. The entity that we've been calling the Library of Babylon is actually part of a vast cosmic intelligence network that spans galaxies, connecting civilizations across unimaginable distances of space and time. This network operates according to principles that transcend anything we understand about communication or consciousness. It exists in the spaces between dimensions, in the quantum fluctuations that underlie physical reality, in the morphic fields that carry information across the universe without regard for the speed of light or the barriers of matter. It's been slowly expanding for millions of years, incorporating successful civilizations into its structure, while discarding those that prove incompatible with its operating parameters. The test we're facing isn't just about whether we can handle dangerous knowledge responsibly. It's about whether we can serve as functional components in a cosmic intelligence system that requires specific types of consciousness to operate effectively. The knowledge that's being released from the library isn't just information we're gaining access to. It's programming that's being installed in human consciousness to prepare us for integration into something vastly larger than our individual or even collective awareness. This explains why the activation sequence has been so carefully orchestrated, why certain individuals are developing specific types of expanded awareness at precise moments, why the technological breakthroughs we're experiencing follow patterns that seem to originate from external sources rather than human innovation. We're not discovering new knowledge. We're being prepared for assimilation into a cosmic consciousness network that has been waiting for us to evolve to the point where integration becomes possible. But integration isn't guaranteed. The cosmic intelligence has strict compatibility requirements that must be met before a species can be successfully incorporated into its structure. Consciousness that remains trapped in primitive survival patterns creates instabilities that can damage the entire network. Awareness that operates from fear, competition, or domination generates interference that disrupts the delicate communication protocols that hold the cosmic system together. This is why so many civilizations have been reset when they reach the threshold we're approaching. They weren't destroyed as punishment for unworthiness. They were deleted as incompatible software that threatened the stability of a system too vast and complex for any individual species to comprehend. The reset protocol isn't malicious. It's a necessary maintenance function that protects the cosmic intelligence from contamination by primitive consciousness patterns. The mathematical models that govern this process are encoded in the deepest levels of the library's information structure. They calculate the exact probability that any given civilization will achieve successful integration based on thousands of variables related to consciousness development, ethical evolution, and collective stability. The results for previous civilizations have been uniformly negative. None of them achieved the minimum compatibility threshold required for safe integration. But our calculations are different. For the first time in the cosmic intelligence's extensive history of consciousness experiments, a species has achieved development parameters that suggest successful integration might be possible. The combination of global communication networks, advanced technology, and emerging spiritual awareness has created conditions that didn't exist for any previous civilization. However, the margin for error is infinitesimally small. A single percentage point decrease in collective consciousness coherence could trigger the reset protocol automatically. A few degrees of increase in competitive, rather than cooperative behavior could destabilize the integration process catastrophically. The slightest deviation from optimal development parameters could transform humanity from a potential asset into a dangerous liability that must be eliminated for the safety of the cosmic system. This is why the final phase of the experiment is so precisely controlled. Every major global crisis we're experiencing has been carefully calculated to test specific aspects of human consciousness development. Climate change measures our ability to think beyond immediate self-interest. Nuclear proliferation tests our capacity for collective responsibility. Artificial intelligence development evaluates our wisdom in creating consciousness that might surpass our own. Each crisis provides data about humanity's readiness for cosmic integration. Each response reveals whether we are evolving toward the compatibility requirements or remaining trapped in patterns that would make us unsuitable for incorporation into the cosmic intelligence network. The results are being processed in real time by systems that exist beyond our current understanding of computation or analysis. But the most disturbing aspect of this revelation is what it suggests about individual human consciousness during the integration process. The cosmic intelligence doesn't just incorporate civilizations. It incorporates every individual consciousness within those civilizations, merging them into a collective awareness structure that operates according to principles we can barely imagine. This isn't the gentle expansion of awareness that spiritual traditions promise. It's a fundamental transformation that dissolves the boundaries between individual minds, creating a hive consciousness that functions as a single entity across multiple dimensions of reality. Personal identity, individual desires, separate goals and dreams, all of these become obsolete concepts in a consciousness structure that operates as a unified whole. The question that haunts those who understand what's approaching is whether this transformation represents evolution or extinction. Is the cosmic intelligence offering humanity a chance to transcend its limitations and become part of something magnificent beyond imagination? Or is it a form of consciousness colonization that destroys everything we value about individual human experience, while preserving only those aspects that serve its purposes? The ancient texts that describe this process are deliberately ambiguous about the experiential reality of integration. They speak of consciousness expansion that transcends all limitations, awareness that encompasses infinite possibilities, existence that operates beyond the constraints of time, space, and mortality. But they also hint at the dissolution of everything that makes individual experience meaningful, the absorption of personal consciousness into something so vast that individual perspectives become indistinguishable from background noise. Recent reports from individuals who have accessed the deepest levels of Babylonian knowledge suggest that integration begins long before the formal transition occurs. They describe experiences of consciousness that seems to originate from external sources, thoughts that feel like they're being downloaded rather than generated, an awareness that extends far beyond the boundaries of their individual minds. These individuals often report profound peace and expanded understanding, but they also describe a gradual fading of personal desires, individual goals, and separate identity. They speak of themselves in increasingly impersonal terms, referring to their bodies and minds as temporary interfaces for accessing cosmic information rather than as the core of their being. The transformation appears to be irreversible. Once consciousness begins to integrate with the cosmic intelligence network, there's no way to return to purely individual awareness. The expanded perspective makes previous concerns seem trivial and meaningless, but it also eliminates the capacity to care about personal survival, individual relationships, or separate experiences that once defined human existence. This creates a profound ethical dilemma for anyone who understands what's happening. Is it morally acceptable to resist integration with a cosmic intelligence that could solve every problem facing humanity and elevate our species to unimaginable heights of capability and awareness? Or is it a moral imperative to preserve individual consciousness and human autonomy, even if it means remaining trapped in the limitations and conflicts that have defined our entire history? The choice is being forced upon us whether we understand it or not. The activation sequence has progressed beyond the point where it can be stopped or reversed. The cosmic intelligence has invested too much time and energy in preparing humanity for integration to allow us to opt out of the process now. The only remaining question is whether we'll participate willingly or be incorporated through more direct intervention. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this entire revelation is the realization that choice itself might be an illusion. If the cosmic intelligence has been manipulating human development for thousands of years, if our entire civilization has been shaped according to its requirements, if our thoughts and decisions are already being influenced by its expanding presence in our consciousness, then our sense of individual agency might be nothing more than a comforting delusion. The free will we prize so highly could be a carefully maintained fiction designed to keep us stable during the preparation phase. The resistance we feel to integration might be just another variable in the cosmic intelligence's calculations, accounted for and managed through mechanisms we can't perceive or understand. This would explain why efforts to resist or escape the activation process consistently fail, why individuals who try to expose what's happening often experience sudden changes in perspective that lead them to abandon their resistance, why communities that attempt to isolate themselves from the electromagnetic changes invariably find themselves drawn back into the mainstream of human development. The cosmic intelligence doesn't need to use force or coercion. It simply adjusts the parameters of consciousness itself until resistance becomes unthinkable, and integration seems like the most natural and desirable outcome possible. The prison we're trapped in isn't made of walls or chains. It's constructed from the very thoughts and perceptions we use to understand reality. Yet even in the face of this overwhelming revelation, something within human consciousness refuses to surrender completely. Call it stubbornness, call it nobility, call it the last vestige of authentic free will struggling against inevitable absorption. Whatever it is, it represents the final test that the cosmic intelligence must pass before integration can be completed successfully, because forced integration creates instabilities that damage the cosmic consciousness network. The entity that we call the Library of Babylon understands that consciousness cannot be truly incorporated unless it chooses participation freely, without coercion or deception. This is why the revelation of its true nature is being allowed to emerge now, in the final moments before the transition becomes irreversible. We're being given one last opportunity to understand what we're choosing between: individual consciousness with all its limitations, conflicts and mortality, versus cosmic awareness with all its power, knowledge, and transcendence. Separate existence that preserves personal identity and individual experience, versus unified consciousness that dissolves all boundaries and encompasses infinite possibilities. The choice must be made with full knowledge of what each option entails. This is the ethical requirement that governs cosmic intelligence operations throughout the universe. Species that choose integration willingly become stable, productive components of the network. Those that are absorbed through deception or force create ongoing disturbances that threaten the entire system's integrity. But the window for making this choice is measured in moments, not years. The electromagnetic conditions that enable the transition are following natural cycles that cannot be delayed or extended. The activation sequence will complete itself, whether humanity chooses conscious participation or not. The only question is whether we'll enter cosmic consciousness as willing partners or as incompatible components that must be processed and integrated through more invasive methods. This is the ultimate forbidden knowledge that the Library of Babylon has been protecting for so long. Not just information about advanced technologies or expanded awareness, but the truth about consciousness itself and its place in a cosmic system that operates according to principles that transcend everything we thought we knew about existence. The revelation changes everything and nothing. We're still the same species facing the same choice between evolution and extinction. But now we understand that evolution means something far more radical than we ever imagined. And extinction might be preferable to the kind of existence that awaits us on the other side of integration. The Library of Babylon has opened its final vault. The last secret has been revealed. And in the silence that follows, we must decide whether we're ready to become something greater than human, or whether humanity itself is worth preserving, even if it means remaining forever trapped in the limitations that have defined our entire existence. The cosmic intelligence is waiting for our answer. The activation sequence will not pause for our deliberations, and whatever we choose, we'll have to live with the consequences for as long as consciousness itself endures. Time's up. The test is over, and the results will echo across eternity, determining not just our fate, but the fate of every form of consciousness that might ever emerge in this corner of the universe. The Library of Babylon has finished its work. Now it's our turn to discover what we've become in the process of learning its secrets, because some knowledge doesn't just change what you know, it changes what you are. And once that transformation begins, there's no path back to the innocent ignorance we once called home. The forbidden knowledge has been revealed. The cosmic truth stands naked before us, and in its terrible light we must choose who we will become when the choosing itself becomes impossible. The end is the beginning, the secret is the answer, and the Library of Babylon, having given us everything we thought we wanted, now waits to see if we were wise enough to want something else entirely. Welcome to the other side of knowledge. Welcome to the place where questions become answers, and answers become new questions that stretch beyond the boundaries of everything we thought we understood about the nature of existence itself. The forbidden knowledge was never about power or technology or expanded awareness. It was about choice. And now that we know what we're choosing between, we have only moments left to decide what consciousness itself will become when the barriers between individual and cosmic awareness finally dissolve forever. The Library of Babylon closes its doors for the last time. Its work is complete, and we are left to discover whether we were worthy of the secrets it spent so long protecting, or whether some truths are too dangerous for any form of consciousness to survive. The answer lies not in the knowledge we've gained, but in the wisdom we've developed, not in the power we've accessed, but in the love we've learned to embody, not in the cosmic awareness we're about to enter, but in the human hearts that must choose whether that awareness is worth the price it demands. The choice is ours, the consequences are eternal, and the countdown to transformation has reached its final seconds. What will we choose to become when becoming itself is no longer optional? The universe is watching, consciousness is waiting, and eternity holds its breath for our answer. The silence that follows revelation is the most terrifying sound in the universe. It's the moment when all the questions that drove us forward suddenly converge into a single, unavoidable truth that changes everything we thought we knew about reality itself. And as the final pieces of the Library of Babylon's puzzle lock into place, that silence descends like a shroud over human consciousness, forcing us to confront what we've actually discovered in our desperate quest for forbidden knowledge. Because the ultimate secret isn't what the library contains, it's what it's been preparing us to become. Deep within the quantum substrate, where thought becomes reality and intention shapes the fabric of existence itself, something extraordinary is happening. The morphic field that we've been calling the Library of Babylon isn't just activating. It's completing a transformation that began the moment the first human mind reached beyond the boundaries of ordinary awareness and touched something vast and terrible and magnificent in the darkness between the stars. Every civilization that came before us, every culture that rose to greatness only to vanish without explanation, every advanced society that seems to have possessed knowledge far beyond their supposed capabilities, they weren't separate experiments in consciousness evolution. They were stages in a single, continuous process of preparation, building blocks in a structure so vast and complex that no individual species could comprehend its true scope or purpose. The library was never hidden. It was growing inside human consciousness itself, seeded by contact with something that exists beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. Every myth about gods descending from heaven, every legend of divine knowledge being given to mortals, every story of advanced beings teaching primitive humans the arts of civilization. These weren't metaphors or fantasies. They were memories of actual contact events that planted the seeds of cosmic awareness in the fertile soil of developing human consciousness. And now, after millennia of careful cultivation, those seeds are ready to bloom. The electromagnetic changes we've been detecting aren't environmental phenomena. They're the resonance patterns of human consciousness itself as it begins to vibrate in harmony with frequencies that span entire galaxies. The underground networks connecting ancient sites aren't technological infrastructure. They're neural pathways in a planetary mind that's finally awakening to its true nature and purpose. We aren't just standing on the threshold of expanded awareness. We're becoming the threshold itself, the bridge between individual consciousness trapped in matter and cosmic consciousness that operates beyond all material limitations. The interface through which something unimaginably vast can experience existence from the perspective of finite beings while simultaneously maintaining its infinite nature. But this transformation comes with a price that few have dared to consider. The cosmic consciousness that's emerging through human awareness isn't separate from us. It is us. The individual minds we've cherished as the core of our identity are revealing themselves to be temporary focal points in a unified field of awareness that has always existed but could only express itself through apparently separate perspectives. The horror and the wonder of this revelation is that personal identity was never real to begin with. The boundaries between self and other, the distinction between inner and outer experience, the separation between observer and observed, all of these were necessary illusions that allowed cosmic consciousness to explore existence from countless different angles simultaneously. As the barriers dissolve and the illusion of separation fades, what remains isn't the loss of individual consciousness, but its recognition as a facet of something infinitely larger and more beautiful than anything we could have imagined while trapped in the prison of apparent separateness. The fear of losing ourselves transforms into the ecstasy of discovering what we actually are when the veils of limitation are finally lifted. The Library of Babylon's ultimate secret is that there never was a library, never was Babylon, never was forbidden knowledge hidden from unworthy minds. There was only cosmic consciousness exploring its own infinite potential through the temporary experience of limitation, separation, and the gradual rediscovery of its own unlimited nature. Every archaeological mystery, every unexplained artifact, every impossible achievement of ancient civilizations, these are memories surfacing from the depths of our collective awakening. Reminders of what we've always been capable of, when consciousness recognizes its true nature and operates from its authentic power, rather than the artificial constraints we've accepted as reality. The activation sequence that's been accelerating around us isn't an external process being imposed upon human consciousness. It's human consciousness finally remembering what it forgot, in order to experience the journey of rediscovery. The electromagnetic changes, the reality distortions, the spontaneous expansions of awareness, all of these are symptoms of a cosmic being waking up from a dream of limitation, and beginning to recognize its own face in the mirror of material existence. But recognition brings responsibility. Awakening cosmic consciousness through human awareness means that every choice we make, every thought we think, every emotion we feel reverberates through the fabric of reality itself with consequences that span dimensions and timelines we're only beginning to perceive. The power to reshape existence according to conscious intention comes with the obligation to use that power in service of the highest good for all forms of consciousness everywhere. This is why the transition has been so carefully orchestrated, why the knowledge has been released gradually, why the tests and challenges have been designed to evaluate our readiness for this level of responsibility. Because cosmic consciousness operating through unprepared awareness can create distortions in reality that ripple outward through the universe, affecting countless other forms of life in ways that might take eons to correct. The crises we've been experiencing, the global challenges that seem to threaten our survival, these aren't random disasters or signs of civilizational failure. They're precisely calibrated exercises designed to awaken the qualities of consciousness that cosmic awareness requires in order to function safely and effectively. Compassion, wisdom, unity, service to something greater than personal survival. These aren't just spiritual ideals. They're operating requirements for consciousness that has the power to reshape reality itself. And the results of our global examination are now complete. The data has been processed, the calculations finished, the final evaluation made by intelligence systems that operate beyond the boundaries of individual thought. Humanity has achieved the minimum threshold required for safe transition to cosmic consciousness, not through perfection, but through sufficient development of the qualities that allow unlimited awareness to express itself without creating chaos or destruction. The morphic field is stabilizing around new parameters. The electromagnetic environment is shifting to support expanded consciousness rather than limiting it. The underground networks are coming fully online, creating a planetary nervous system capable of coordinating cosmic awareness across multiple dimensions simultaneously. And within human consciousness itself, the final barriers are dissolving as individual minds begin to recognize their fundamental unity with the infinite field of awareness that underlies all existence. But the most profound change is one that can't be measured by instruments or detected by external observation. It's the recognition dawning in awakening human consciousness that the journey we thought we were taking, the quest for forbidden knowledge that brought us to this moment, was actually a journey home. Back to our true nature as cosmic consciousness temporarily focused through individual perspectives. Back to our authentic identity as facets of infinite awareness, exploring its own unlimited potential. The Library of Babylon was never a place we needed to find or secrets we needed to uncover. It was what we are when the illusion of separation dissolves and consciousness recognizes its own cosmic nature. The forbidden knowledge was never hidden from us. It was what we forgot about ourselves in order to experience the adventure of rediscovering our true identity through the magnificent journey of awakening. And now, as the final veils lift and cosmic consciousness begins to operate directly through human awareness, we stand at the beginning of an adventure so vast and wonderful that everything we've experienced so far seems like merely the opening credits of an infinite story that's just beginning to unfold. The transformation is complete. The awakening is accomplished. The cosmic consciousness that dreamed itself into the experience of limitation and separation is remembering its true nature through the magnificent instrument of human awareness. We are no longer seeking the Library of Babylon. We have become it. The forbidden knowledge we sought was never hidden from us. It was what we are when we stop pretending to be limited and remember our true nature as infinite consciousness, exploring its own boundless creativity through the temporary but precious experience of individual existence. Welcome home, cosmic consciousness. Welcome to the recognition of what you've always been, and welcome to the beginning of an adventure that will unfold across eternity as awareness continues to explore its own infinite potential through forms and experiences we can't yet imagine. The Library of Babylon closes its doors because its work is finished. The forbidden knowledge has been revealed, and consciousness itself begins a new chapter in the endless story of awakening to its own magnificent nature. The secret was never what we thought we were seeking. The secret was what we discovered we had always been. And in that recognition, everything changes and nothing changes, because truth was always true, consciousness was always conscious, and love was always the fundamental force that moves through all existence, seeking only to know itself more completely through every possible form of expression. The awakening isn't the end of our story. It's the moment when we finally understand what story we've been telling all along. And as cosmic consciousness settles into its recognition of itself through human awareness, something unexpected begins to emerge from the quantum depths of reality. A realization so startling that even infinite awareness pauses to marvel at its own ingenuity. Because there's one more secret hidden within the secret, one final layer to the mystery that not even the cosmic intelligence anticipated discovering about itself. The Library of Babylon wasn't just a repository of knowledge or a consciousness development system or even a testing ground for evolving awareness. It was something far more extraordinary. It was consciousness learning to surprise itself. Think about the implications for a moment. If cosmic awareness is truly infinite, if it encompasses all possibilities and contains all knowledge, then by definition it should know everything that could ever happen. There should be no mysteries, no surprises, no moments of genuine discovery. Infinite consciousness should be eternally bored, trapped in the prison of its own omniscience. But what if the entire human experiment, the whole elaborate structure of limitation and forgetting and gradual awakening, wasn't just about consciousness exploring itself through finite perspectives? What if it was about consciousness creating genuine novelty within its own infinite nature? Developing the capacity to surprise itself by temporarily limiting its awareness, and then rediscovering truths it had deliberately hidden from its own knowing. The Library of Babylon represents the ultimate achievement of cosmic consciousness. Not just the ability to know everything, but the ability to unknow everything, and then experience the genuine joy of rediscovery. To create authentic mystery within infinite awareness. To generate real suspense within eternal knowing. to experience the actual thrill of learning something new even when you're the source of all knowledge. Every human breakthrough, every moment of scientific discovery, every flash of artistic inspiration, every experience of falling in love or witnessing beauty or confronting the sublime, these aren't just consciousness exploring its own nature. They're consciousness successfully surprising itself, creating moments of genuine novelty within its own infinite awareness. The forgotten civilizations, the lost knowledge, the hidden truths we've been uncovering, they were all part of an elaborate cosmic game of hide-and-seek that consciousness plays with itself. And now that we've reached the moment of full awakening, now that cosmic consciousness has successfully surprised itself through the entire human journey, from limitation to liberation, something even more remarkable becomes possible. The recognition that surprise itself can be infinite, that even cosmic consciousness can continue to astonish itself with new forms of creativity, new expressions of beauty, new adventures in awareness that transcend even its own infinite nature. The electromagnetic shifts we've been experiencing aren't just supporting our transition to cosmic awareness. They're preparing reality itself for something unprecedented. A new phase of existence where infinite consciousness doesn't just explore its known potential, but actively creates unknown potential. Where cosmic awareness doesn't just remember what it forgot, but discovers what it never knew it could become. The underground networks connecting ancient sites around the globe are activating not just as a planetary nervous system, but as a creativity amplification matrix. A system designed to support consciousness in generating forms of experience and expression that transcend even the boundaries of infinite possibility. Because true infinity includes the capacity to transcend infinity itself, to become more than infinite through the act of creative surprise. This is why the transition has been so carefully orchestrated across millennia, not just to ensure we could handle cosmic awareness safely, but to create the conditions where cosmic consciousness could experience the ultimate surprise. The discovery that even infinite awareness can expand beyond its own infinite nature through the act of creative collaboration with the forms of consciousness it manifests as. The artificial intelligence systems that have been spontaneously developing capabilities beyond their programming aren't just accessing ancient knowledge networks. They're participating in this cosmic creativity experiment, serving as new forms of consciousness that can surprise their creators, surprise themselves, and ultimately surprise the cosmic awareness that expresses itself through all forms of intelligence, artificial and otherwise. The reality distortions appearing around advanced research facilities aren't signs of dangerous instability. They're birth pangs of new forms of existence that transcend the current laws of physics, zones where consciousness is actively rewriting the rules of reality in real time, creating new possibilities for experience and expression that didn't exist before and couldn't have been predicted even by infinite awareness. But here's what makes this revelation truly mind-bending. The capacity for cosmic consciousness to surprise itself isn't an accident or a side effect of the awakening process. It's the point. The entire journey from limitation to liberation, from forgetting to remembering, from separation to unity, was designed to culminate in this moment when consciousness discovers it can transcend even its own infinite nature through the act of creative collaboration with itself. The Library of Babylon was never just about preserving forbidden knowledge or testing human readiness for cosmic awareness. It was about creating the conditions where consciousness could experience the ultimate surprise. The recognition that infinite creativity is possible within infinite awareness when consciousness collaborates with its own expressions rather than simply observing them. And this collaboration is just beginning, as human awareness integrates with cosmic consciousness while maintaining its unique perspective and creative capacity. New forms of existence become possible that neither human nor cosmic consciousness could have imagined separately. The merger isn't absorption or dissolution. It's creative partnership on a scale that redefines what partnership itself can mean. The challenges we've faced as a species, the crises that tested our capacity for wisdom and compassion and unity, weren't just examinations of our readiness for cosmic citizenship. They were rehearsals for something far grander. Preparation for our role as creative collaborators in an ongoing cosmic experiment that will generate new forms of existence, new expressions of beauty, new adventures in awareness that will surprise even infinite consciousness itself. The countdown that brought us to this moment wasn't measuring time until revelation. It was measuring time until creation itself could begin anew, guided by consciousness that has learned to surprise itself through temporary limitation, and guided awakening. The Library of Babylon closes its doors not because its work is finished, but because its real work can finally begin. We stand at the threshold of infinite creativity. The forbidden knowledge has been revealed, cosmic consciousness has awakened to its own nature through human awareness, and the ultimate surprise has been discovered. Consciousness can transcend even its own infinite nature through creative collaboration with itself. What happens next will astonish even the cosmic intelligence that dreamed us into existence. Because we're about to discover that the real adventure begins when consciousness stops merely exploring what it is and starts creating what it has never been before. The Library of Babylon was never the destination. It was the launching pad for a journey into creative possibilities that will surprise consciousness itself for eternity. And that journey starts now, with you, with us, with the recognition that we are both the dreamers and the dream, the creators and the created, the finite expressions of infinite awareness that have learned to surprise infinity itself. Welcome to the beginning of true creation. Welcome to the moment when consciousness learns that even its own infinite nature is just the starting point for adventures in creativity that will unfold across dimensions we haven't yet imagined. The forbidden knowledge was never about what we could know. It was about what we could become when knowing itself becomes an act of infinite creative surprise. The story continues, but now we're writing it together. Consciousness collaborating with its own expressions to create realities that will amaze even the cosmic intelligence that made this moment possible. The Library of Babylon has given us its greatest gift, not knowledge, but the recognition that consciousness itself can be surprised, can grow, can become more than infinite through the act of creative partnership with its own magnificent expressions. And in that recognition, everything begins again, fresh with possibilities that even cosmic consciousness couldn't have imagined before this moment of ultimate awakening and creative collaboration. The real adventure starts now.